Bagmi.
Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy. Can you talk a little bit about your company and then how do you use Rails?
Yeah. So my company is scientist.com, and I work in the software services of scientist.com. Scientist.com itself is a marketplace for research. So on the research and development side of things. So if you have things that you need to facilitate your research, you can purchase it through that marketplace, or if you sell the things that help research, you can sell it on the marketplace. And I work as a consultant on the software services, where we provide the full support of, like, do you need basically a full IT shop? Do you need some developers to help you out on stuff? It's for the clients that do the research, but we also are available for additional work for other clients. Work a lot personally with academic universities and research libraries, working with their complicated metadata and digital artifacts and cultural heritage artifacts, as well as a consortial group of Rails developers. I'm also on a board for that nonprofit, samvera.org, and advocating for the principles of open source is something that I hold near and dear.
Wonderful, wonderful. How are you finding this conference so far?
Love it. I attended Rails conference in 2009, 10, and 11, and I took a however long hiatus, 12-year hiatus. Never quite worked out, but I submitted a talk. It was accepted, and I am so thankful because that made it easy for me to come here. So it's fantastic.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you've been working with Rails for a really long time, right?
I've been working with Rails since December 2005.
Wow, that's almost the very early days.
It was very early. Yeah.
I'd assume it's right after the 15-minute video. Was it?
It was right around there, and the CEO at the company that I was at was like, "Hey, Snakes and Rubies is happening in Chicago. We're all going to load up on a bus or a van, and we're going to drive there, and we're going to look at the two, and we're going to make some decisions. We have some very big clients, and we're going to need these some kind of framework." So we looked and listened, and it was Django or Rails, and the developer happiness manifesto of Rails really hit home, and the expressiveness of, like, the Activerecord, like, DSL was like, this is amazing. And we went back, and the next week I hard advocated, like, we should use Rails. We'll explore it, and since then I've been doing Rails.
Wow, that's wonderful. So I guess you're on, like, version 7 now of latest, or what? I mean,
yeah. So in the community that we're at, we're working to move through some of the older things. We have a 2.7 app, and this is a distributed community that is always, like, under-resourced. So 2.7 Ruby and 5.2 Rails with upgrade patterns to get to 6. And then hopefully 7, but we have a lot of gems that we have maintained and built, so it's a complex orchestration to move all of that along.
Nice, nice. So you mentioned Activerecord, but are there other parts of Rails that you love?
The thing that I love is some of the really subtle idioms of active support. So I have a degree in mathematics, and null means something different than an empty array.
Right.
But Rails is kind of like, but most people think of it this way. And so that little touch that takes the mathematical precision and says, let's make it a human-centric, really, like, helps save a lot of heartburn. And I do a lot of, like, not Rails development where I do Ruby development, and I'm always like, what do I not get? Because it has made a lot of just simple assumptions easier. And it's always that trade-off of, like, do I include active support or not? And if it's for myself, I might not.
Mhm.
But if I'm ever going to share it, I'm like, no, it's going to use active support because another developer will come in and make an assumption,
Right.
and I want us to be on the same page.
Makes sense. So are there any like sharp edges to Rails or things that you would like Rails to do better? I mean, one of the things that I have always found is that, hey, I think it started off with the structure of like modules, views, controllers,
Mm-hmm.
but then as apps scale, that structure is not enough. You need bounded context. You need these things.
Yeah,
I mean, like every Rails app does services in its own way, I suppose.
right,
Right? Those are some of the things I felt like, hey, maybe if the framework is a bit more opinionated on the way you
sure,
organize those domains.
right. Um, so back, I forget. So when Jim Wyrick died,
Mhm.
I was starting a new project. I was like, Jim, when he would speak and shared stuff, I was like, there's something in there that he is learning, and he is on the like he's exploring. I'm gonna go learn. I'm gonna go really dig into that. And I made an application that kind of leveraged some of that, and it had some of the hexagonal concepts. But I think the sharp edges of like what do you name, the pattern I've adopted is that app folder will have like app services or app workers or app like decorators or app this, but that one level down, I will put a module
Mhm.
that says, this is what this is about.
Right.
This is the local language that I'm using,
Mhm.
and explain it. So that guidance to say, app is yours to do, but give your developers wayfinding to
Right.
say, what do I mean in this case?
Mhm.
So the opinions, I think we could end up with a really long, ugly, like conversation that is not productive,
Right.
but like that guidance
Mhm.
of put it in your app directory, name it,
Right.
describe it, make a glossary,
Mhm.
that opinion is huge.
Right. I think that'll be really helpful. Yeah, and the Rails community talks a lot about like monoliths,
Yeah.
majestic monoliths, but
Mhm.
sometimes monoliths end up not being that majestic, or
Right.
they eventually will become majestic, right?
Right.
Like for these reasons, right? That you said, well, like, so what are your opinions of that? I mean,
Yeah. So I I work in what would be called the Majestic Monolith, but it is comprised of numerous Rails engines.
right.
Um, and I think the key aspect of it is understanding the maintenance side of the equation. Um, and typically that means when you're exploring a new space, you go down these pathways that you don't understand the consequences for in the long haul. And so the monolith has some well understood, these are the consequences. And it affords this like holistic, like, what is it that we are working with? And I think it is a great anchoring point. So like an archipelago
Mhm.
where you have a large island. This is the island that's important. And then look at how it contributes,
Mhm.
and look at like, where do I need to have the performance aspects? Where do I need to have the horizontal scaling concerns, and start looking at those boundaries? What's
Mhm.
the bridge to get
Right.
from the along the archipelago, to make that happen? So it's reframing, like, how will I maintain,
Mhm.
not I, how will we
We maintain.
maintain this? Because the tear it down, chase something new is a very, I kind of look and say, the problems that we have in this world tend to come from that, like, oh,
Mhm.
just tear it down and build something new. And it's like,
Right.
that doesn't help. We have to look at the long term, like how we live with something.
Mhm.
And I've found like living with the monolith
Mhm.
is is kind of nice because you know what it'll look like.
Right.
But you got to help people know what it looks like, and you know it hurts in places. Pay attention to it, fix it a little bit, but own it as a whole.
And Basecamp and DHH, they have also been talking about their move away from AWS onto their own hosting infrastructure.
Sure.
I assume you're on the cloud.
Yeah. So the nature of the consultancy is we go where our clients will kind of have us go, and we also have our own ecosystems where we'll run stuff. And so we're always looking at how can we be portable or mindful of like what is the environment. Some will have a data center that they're going to run in. Some will say no, we're entirely AWS or Azure or whatever the other ones are. So my thoughts are, I definitely love the idea of like, here is the servers where the main island is, and then you can kind of look at the architectural topography and say, this makes sense for Lambda space, right? Something where it can spin up fast, and use the heterogeneous nature of what's available, but understanding like what are the problems that we're trying to deal with, and do an assessment of that. And it's not just what are the technical problems, because sometimes it can be what are the wayfinding problems or the training problems to get people to work on this thing that we've made. So build your systems to reflect the problems that you're solving.
So are there any other technologies or languages that you're exploring apart from Ruby and Rails?
Yes. I am exploring Lisp.
Oh, nice.
So 2.5 years ago, there's kind of a blank spot. I changed my text editor. I strongly believe in having an open source editor, and I explored Vim, VS Code, and the place that I didn't think I would end up was in Emacs, and so I'm looking at Lisp a lot, and realizing like, oh, Lisp and Ruby have a lot of similarities, and it's having that other language perspective, especially one that comes from like a very, very basic structures and concepts, has helped reshape some of the thinking. And you know, it's these days an esoteric language, but it's one that I'm like, this is interesting to look at something that was 45 years ago, right? And what that means. So I'm kind of a fan of old and boring. I love SQL. That's from the 70s. Obviously, developments happen, but the thing that is, I don't know, there's like some kind of law or something when you look at its viability into the future, it is often a matter of looking at how long has it been around. So I look and say, Rails has been around for a while, and the probability of it being around for a while more is higher than some of these other things. And the other things can explore the large problem space, and everything can learn from each other. But again, what is the human cost, the maintenance cost, the like caloric cost to run all of the servers and like belching out carbon to do these things, when it's like, yeah, we don't need, like, is that a place we need to explore? Maybe a little bit, but I don't think we need to be all in on each of these new emerging techs, because there's so much general like support these things. It's, I guess, potholes show up in the roads. Do we need more roads, or do we need like
Patch them up.
patch the potholes, right? Maybe we need more roads in some places, but let's make sure that what we have continues to be able to support and move with the changing and developing needs.
So yeah, I mean, do you have any open source projects or like people that you'd like to give a shout out to in the community?
Oh yeah, so one of the open source projects that I work on, I mentioned it earlier, is samvera.org. We are a consortia of academic research libraries and cultural heritage institutions that have been using Rails for 13, 14 years and maintaining stuff that time. And when we had our keynote at the start of the conference from Eileen, she was talking about Rails is a framework and a community. We have been saying that in Samvera about that, like it is a framework and a community, and it really resonated. So the folks who have really helped make that happen, and I think a shout out would be to Richard Green, who is a lovely retired gentleman from the UK. He was a community manager for a very long time and had this deep passion of like, I don't know if he coded, but he made sure that the community could get the coding done. And that was really important to move these projects forward together. So
yeah, it's important to realize and recognize the people who have. I mean, it's ultimately a human endeavor,
right?
Even though it's technology, I mean,
right.
It is,
and I can keep listing names because they're very near and dear people that have made a tremendous impact in how I think about community, how I think about software, how I think about the constraints that we live with, and kind of navigate a scarcity mindset when that is an anti-pattern to community. And I want to continue to have like that growth mindset and help facilitate that.
Absolutely. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.